The scent of blood and fear permeated the slave market of Silverlight territory. Beneath a canopy of ancient pines, traders and spectators gathered like vultures around their most prized captive. In the center of a crude wooden cage lay the broken form of a man who had once been legend. Magnus, the feared Alpha Lord of Shadowfell, now lay stripped of armor and dignity, his powerful frame racked with spasms of agony. The Shadowbane poison coursed through his veins like liquid fire. Each heartbeat spread the venom further, sending flashes of hallucinations through his mind. One moment he stood on the battlefield commanding his forces. The next, he was here, prisoner to those who had been enemies for 30 years. The world flickered between reality and nightmare as jeering faces pressed against the wooden bars. "The mighty Alpha Lord," spat a heavy-set traitor, prodding Magnus with a wooden staff. "Not so fearsome now, are you?" The crowd laughed, emboldened by the display of the fallen warrior. Few had ever seen an alpha of Magnus's stature brought so low. Magnus refused to give them the satisfaction of a response. At 45, his body bore the scars of countless battles, each one a testament to his survival. His silver-streaked dark hair hung in matted strands across a face etched with lines of experience. But it was his eyes that held the crowd's attention. Amber and fierce despite his condition, burning with an unbroken will, even as poison ravaged him from within. Beyond the market's edge, in a modest cottage nestled against the boundary of Silverlight territory, Arya woke with a start. The dream had come again, a massive black wolf with amber eyes, wounded and surrounded by shadows. For 3 nights, the same vision had haunted her sleep, each time more vivid than before. She sat up, her unseeing eyes open, but perceiving nothing of the physical world. "Another nightmare?" Alara's voice came from across their small, shared room, concern evident in her tone. At 30, Arya's older sister had been her protector since their parents' death 13 years ago. Arya nodded, brushing long chestnut hair away from her face. "The same one. A warrior wolf, dying but still fighting. Something's happening, Alara. Something important." Though blind since age 12, Arya navigated her world with remarkable precision. Her other senses had sharpened to compensate for her lost sight, but it was another ability altogether that made her special. Where others saw with eyes, Arya saw with her spirit, perceiving the emotional energies and intentions that flowed through all living things. This gift had made her both valued and feared within the Silverlight pack. "The market day begins soon," Alara said, the wooden floor creaking beneath her weight as she rose. "Best not to speak of dreams. The council already watches you too closely." Arya's fingers found the pendant at her throat, an amber stone set in silver, her mother's final gift. "My dreams have meaning, even if Elder Thornwald refuses to acknowledge them." She swung her legs over the bedside, bare feet finding the cool floor with practiced ease. "What news from the village?" Alara hesitated, the subtle catch in her breath telling Arya more than words could. "They brought in new captives yesterday, Shadowfell warriors caught near the border." Another pause. "One of them is said to be their leader, Magnus himself." The name sent a chill through Arya. Magnus, the Alpha Lord whose forces had clashed with Silverlight for 3 decades, the subject of fireside stories meant to frighten children. A killer, they said. A monster in warrior's form. "They've poisoned him with Shadowbane," Alara continued, her voice lowered despite their solitude. "They say he won't last the day." Shadowbane, the rarest and most terrible of poisons, extracted from the darkness flowers that bloomed only in ancient battlefields soaked with the blood of alphas. It attacked not just the body, but the spirit, trapping its victims in waking nightmares until death came as a mercy. "I need to see him," Arya said suddenly, rising to her feet. Alara moved quickly to block her path, though Arya sensed her sister's position without needing to see. "Have you lost your mind? He's Shadowfell, the enemy." "He's the wolf from my dreams," Arya insisted. Her hands found Alara's shoulders, feeling the tension there. Something is wrong about all of this. 30 years of war based on what? A border dispute? The death of an ambassador that neither side truly investigated? "These are dangerous questions," Elara warned, "the kind that got mother and father killed." Their parents had been diplomats, attempting to broker peace between the territories before being ambushed on the borderlands. Their deaths had only deepened the hatred between the packs. "Perhaps it's time someone asked them again," Arya replied, her voice steady despite the flutter of fear in her chest. "Help me dress, please." Against her better judgment, Elara relented, helping Arya into a simple gray dress that would attract minimal attention. As an Omega in a society that valued strength above all, Arya had learned the art of invisibility long before losing her sight. Today, that skill would serve her well. The sisters walked arm in arm through the village, Elara guiding Arya around obstacles while appearing to merely accompany her. Arya felt the familiar press of stares against her skin, pity from some, distrust from others. The blind Omega with strange abilities was a curiosity at best, an unsettling reminder of difference at worst. "The market is crowded today," Elara murmured. "Everyone wants to see the great Alpha brought low." Arya absorbed the emotional climate around her, anticipation, cruelty, excitement pulsing from the gathered crowd. But beneath it all, she sensed something else, a thread of ancient power, pulsing like a heartbeat. The closer they came to the center of the market, the stronger it grew. "Let me approach alone," Arya whispered as they neared the cage. "Your position as a hunter is precarious enough without being seen fraternizing with the enemy." "Arya," Elara began to protest. "Trust me." Arya squeezed her sister's arm. "I'll be safe. No one bothers with a blind Omega." Reluctantly, Elara released her, moving to blend with a group of beta traders while keeping Arya in her sightline. Freed from her guide, Arya moved forward with confidence that belied her blindness. The jeering crowd, focused on the spectacle before them, barely noticed as she slipped between bodies toward the cage. The emotional current emanating from the captive nearly staggered her. Pain layered upon pain, rage upon pride, and beneath it all, a wellspring of power unlike anything Arya had ever encountered. This was no ordinary Alpha. The legends had not exaggerated. "Come to gawk at the monster of Shadowfell?" The trader's voice boomed nearby. "1 silver piece to touch his fur when he shifts, 2 to keep a claw when he's dead." Disgust rippled through the crowd, but no one objected. 30 years of war had hardened hearts on both sides. "He will not die today." Arya's voice, though soft, carried in a momentary lull. Heads turned, eyes finding the slender figure of the blind woman standing at the edge of the cage. The trader laughed, a harsh sound like stones grinding together. "The Omega speaks. Tell us, blind one, what do your useless eyes see that ours cannot?" Whispers spread through the crowd. Everyone in Silverlight knew of Arya's occasional prophecies. Some had proven true enough to earn grudging respect, though many dismissed them as coincidence. Arya approached the cage, one hand extended before her until her fingers brushed the rough wood. "I see a warrior poisoned not in fair combat, but through treachery. I see 30 years of hatred built on lies." Her voice strengthened. "And I see that his death will bring a curse upon all Silverlight." Murmurs of superstition rippled through the crowd. The trader's amusement faltered. "Step back, girl. This is no concern of yours." "Let me heal him." Arya's request silenced the crowd. The Shadowbane poison can be drawn out by one with the gift. Inside the cage, Magnus's consciousness drifted between agony and awareness. Through the haze of poison, he perceived the exchange, the soft voice claiming power over the very venom killing him. Impossible. No one survived Shadowbane once it reached the heart, which he estimated would be within hours. Yet something about the woman's voice anchored him, a tether to reality amid the nightmarish visions. "Heal a Shadowfell Alpha? Have you lost your mind?" The traitor loomed over Arya, his bulk casting her in shadow. "Or are you a traitor to your own kind?" Arya stood unwavering. "I am a healer. We take no sides in war." "The council will hear of this," someone in the crowd threatened. "Let them hear." Arya turned her face toward the anonymous voice. Let them explain why they would prevent the healing of any being when our very laws forbid such cruelty." A murmur of reluctant agreement rippled through some of the older pack members. The ancient laws of wolfkind did indeed prohibit torture, even of enemies. A clean death was one thing, prolonged suffering quite another. The trader assessed the shifting mood of the crowd. "Very well," he conceded with poor grace. "Heal him if you can, but when you fail, remember it was your choice to touch the unclean." A small door in the cage was unlatched. Arya ducked inside, the scent of blood and sweat overwhelming her sensitive nose. The cage floor was hard-packed dirt beneath her knees as she knelt beside the fallen alpha. Heat radiated from his fever-racked body. "Can you hear me?" she asked softly, her hands hovering inches from his chest. Magnus struggled to focus on the woman's face. Young, perhaps 25, with features that might have been called delicate in another setting. Here, kneeling in dirt and blood, determination hardened her expression into something formidable. Most striking were her eyes, pale blue and fixed on nothing, yet somehow seeing everything. "Save your mercy," he managed, each word an effort through pain-clenched teeth. "I am beyond healing." "No one is beyond healing while breath remains," Arya replied. Her hands moved with certainty to rest lightly on his chest. "Be still now. This will cause pain before relief." Before Magnus could protest further, warmth flowed from her palms into his chest. The sensation began, as comfort then rapidly intensified to burning, as though the poison fought against extraction. A growl built in his throat as the agony peaked. Arya did not flinch from his pain, nor her task. "The Shadowbane fights to remain," she explained, her voice steady despite the beads of sweat forming on her brow. "It has wrapped tendrils around your spirit. I must unwind them one by one." Around them, the crowd had fallen into uneasy silence, witnessing a healing art few had seen in generations. Even the trader stood transfixed as the blind Omega worked. Alara watched from the edge of the gathering, one hand on the knife concealed at her hip, ready to intervene should the crowd turn ugly. Within Magnus, a battle raged. The Shadowbane poison, sentient in its malevolence, resisted Arya's intrusion. Visions assaulted him, his wife and child, long dead in an earlier raid, battlefields strewn with bodies, the faces of every soul he'd ever failed to protect. The poison used his own memories as weapons. Arya gasped as these images transferred to her through their connection. Not seeing them as Magnus did, she experienced them as emotional impressions: grief, rage, guilt, determination. The complexity of the Alpha's spirit unfolded before her inner perception. This was no simple killer. This was a protector, a leader who carried the weight of his people's survival. "Your memories cannot harm you," she whispered, fingers pressing more firmly against his chest. "They are echoes, not reality." Something shifted between them in that moment. A recognition, a resonance. Arya felt it like a current passing through her hands into his heart and returning changed. Her healing gift had always been a one-way offering, yet here it became an exchange. With a final surge of effort, Arya drew the last of the poison from Magnus's system. The Shadowbane manifested as black vapor rising from his skin, dissipating into the air with a faint hiss. Exhausted, she swayed where she knelt. Magnus's vision cleared for the first time in days. The hallucinations receded, leaving only the reality of the cage, the staring crowd, and the slender woman who had somehow done the impossible. He reached one hand up, fingers brushing her cheek in a gesture of wonder and gratitude. The touch sparked something ancient and powerful between them. Arya felt it as a sudden flood of sensory input. For a heartbeat, she saw colors and shapes through Magnus's eyes, experienced the world as he did. Magnus, in turn, felt a wave of emotion not his own: compassion, curiosity, and underlying fear. The moment broke as Arya pulled back, confusion evident on her face. "What was that?" she whispered. Before Magnus could respond, instinct overrode reason. The Alpha in him recognized something precious and endangered, a healer of rare power, vulnerable in enemy territory. His body moved of its own accord, lunging forward with renewed strength to grasp her shoulders. His teeth found the junction of her neck and shoulder, breaking skin in the ancient claiming bite of an alpha to his chosen mate. Arya's cry of surprise and pain cut through the market's silence. The crowd surged forward as Magnus released her, his own expression mirroring her shock. Neither had expected this turn of events. The claiming bite was involuntary, a primal reaction he hadn't experienced in 20 years. "Seize him!" the traitor roared as Alara pushed through the crowd toward her sister. Magnus moved protectively in front of Arya, his weakened state forgotten as alpha instincts fully engaged. A growl rumbled from his chest, warning all to keep their distance. "What have you done?" Arya pressed her hand to the bite, blood seeping between her fingers. Unlike the onlookers, she understood the significance immediately. An alpha's claiming bite created a bond, one that could not be severed except by death. In the span of heartbeats, their fates had become irrevocably entwined. "I did not intend," Magnus began, but guards were already surrounding the cage, spears pointed inward at the pair. Alara reached them first, eyes wide with horror at the blood on her sister's neck. "By the ancient moon, you've killed us all," she hissed at Magnus before turning to the approaching guard captain. "My sister needs medical attention. The alpha attacked her." "Not an attack," Arya corrected, though her voice wavered. "A claiming." The words fell like stones into still water, ripples of reaction spreading outward through the stunned crowd. A claiming between packs was unprecedented in wartime, a violation of both territories' laws. The guard captain, a grizzled beta named Thorn, assessed the situation with narrowed eyes. "The council must be informed immediately. Both will be detained until judgment is passed." "She's innocent in this," Magnus argued, strength returning to his voice. Though still weakened from the poison, he stood tall, every inch the Alpha Lord, despite his ragged appearance. "The bite was not of her choosing." "Yet she chose to heal you," countered the captain. "Actions have consequences, Shadowfell. You both will face them." Alara's hand tightened around Arya's arm. "My sister requires care for her wound first." "The wound is no ordinary injury," Arya said quietly. "It must run its course." Already she could feel the bond forming, a subtle awareness of Magnus's presence even when not touching. The claiming bite of an alpha carried ancient magic, forging connections beyond the physical. Legends spoke of mated pairs who shared thoughts, feelings, even sensory experiences. Such bonds were rare even in peacetime. In war, they were catastrophic. Under heavy guard, Magnus, Arya, and Alara were escorted through the village toward the council hall. Word spread faster than their procession, and by the time they reached the stone building at the village center, a crowd had gathered. Accusatory whispers followed them: traitor, enemy sympathizer, Shadowfell whore. Arya walked with dignity despite the slurs, her head high and hands still pressed to the claiming bite. Though unseeing, she felt the hatred directed at her from all sides. Only Alara's steady presence beside her provided anchor in the storm of emotions. The council hall fell silent as they entered. 7 elders sat in judgment, the most powerful alphas and betas of Silverlight territory. At their center was Elder Thornwald, his 70 years evident in the white of his hair, but not in his posture, which remained rigid with authority. "An unprecedented situation," he began without preamble, cold eyes moving from Magnus to Arya. "The Alpha Lord of our enemy claimed one of our Omegas on our soil. After she healed him of Shadowbane poison," added another elder, disapproval evident, "an act of treason itself." "Healing is neutral ground," Arya countered, her voice carrying in the stone chamber. "No pack law forbids the easing of suffering." "Silence!" Thornwald's command echoed. "You have forfeited the right to speak, Omega. Your actions today have endangered our entire territory." Magnus stepped forward, chains rattling at his wrists. Despite his captivity, he emanated authority that made several council members shift uncomfortably. "The blame is mine alone. The claiming was instinctual, not planned. Release her from any consequences." Thornwald's laugh held no humor. "How noble," but irrelevant. The bond has begun. I can smell it forming. Do you know what that means, Lord Magnus? It means that she is now a liability to Silverlight and an asset to Shadowfell. Then release us both, Magnus suggested, strategy evident in his measured tone. Return me to my people, and I will ensure peace along the border near her village. Peace? Elder Thornwald rose from his seat, anger breaking through his composure. There can be no peace between our kinds, not after what your father did to our delegation 30 years ago, not after the blood that has soaked the borderlands since. Magnus's expression darkened. My father's actions were in response to your assassins. Don't rewrite history, Thornwald. Both sides bear guilt for this war. And both sides will continue to bear it, Thornwald declared. The Council has reached its decision. The Alpha Lord will be returned to the border, alive but weakened, a gesture of mercy that his people must repay by retreating from the contested territories. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the gathered witnesses. Such leniency was unprecedented. And what of my sister? Alara demanded, stepping forward despite protocol. Thornwald's gaze hardened. The Omega Aria will be exiled from Silverlight territory. The claiming bite makes her a danger to our security. She may take only what she can carry and must be beyond our borders by nightfall. Exile? Alara's voice broke. She's blind. She cannot survive the borderlands alone. Then perhaps her new Alpha will protect her, Thornwald replied coldly. Or perhaps the wilderness will solve our problem more permanently. He turned to the guards. Escort Lord Magnus to the northern border. See him across, then return immediately without engaging Shadowfell forces. To Arya, he added, you have until sundown to collect your possessions and leave. Should you return to Silverlight territory, your life is forfeit. As the council session concluded, Arya stood motionless, the magnitude of her situation settling over her like a physical weight. Exiled from the only home she had ever known, bound to an enemy Alpha, facing the wilderness with only her wits to guide her. Alara wrapped an arm around her shoulders, leading her from the hall as Magnus was taken in the opposite direction toward the border. I'm coming with you, she whispered fiercely. We'll face this together. You can't, Arya replied, the reality of her situation clarifying with each passing moment. Your life is here, your position, your future. My life is with my sister, Alara insisted. Besides, someone has to keep you from walking into trees. Despite everything, Arya smiled faintly. I haven't walked into a tree since I was 13. Their brief moment of normalcy was shattered by a presence at Arya's side. Victor, the scarred beta warrior, known to be Magnus's most loyal captain. How he had managed to infiltrate Silverlight was a mystery, but his purpose was clear in his next words. I've come to escort you to my lord, he stated without preamble. A border crossing is arranged for nightfall. Alara's hand moved to her concealed blade. Who are you to make such arrangements? Someone who has spent 30 years keeping Lord Magnus alive, Victor replied evenly. His voice carried the weight of his 50 years, experiences etched into each syllable. And someone who knows the borderlands are no place for a blind woman alone, regardless of which pack she belongs to. I don't belong to any pack now, Arya observed quietly. The claiming bite has seen to that. Victor studied her with a veteran's assessing gaze. You did what no healer has done in living memory, drew Shadowbane poison from a victim past the second stage. That makes you either miraculous or dangerous. Perhaps both. She's my sister, Alara stated firmly. That's all that matters. Victor nodded once, accepting the protective stance for what it was. Gather only what cannot be replaced. We leave from the western edge of the village at sunset. There will be no second chance. After the grizzled beta departed, the sisters returned to their cottage in silence. The familiar surroundings, the herbs hanging from rafters, the worn furniture, the small loom where Arya wove healing cloths, all of it would be left behind, a lifetime abandoned in hours. The pendant, Arya said suddenly, fingers finding the amber stone at her throat. Mother said it would protect me when I needed it most. Perhaps she foresaw this day. Alara began gathering essentials, sturdy clothing, a hunting knife, preserved food. Mother saw many things, she replied, her voice tight with unshed tears. but I doubt even she could have predicted you bonding with the Alpha Lord of Shadowfell." The claiming bite throbbed at Arya's neck, a constant reminder of her altered fate. Through it, she sensed Magnus's distance growing as he was escorted north. Yet the awareness of him remained, a presence at the edge of her consciousness, foreign yet increasingly familiar. Experimentally, she focused on this connection, wondering if— A flash of vision crossed her mind. Trees passing, armed guards, the sensation of weakened limbs pushed to their limit. For a disorienting moment, she saw through Magnus's eyes as he was marched toward the border. Arya gasped, hand flying to her temple. "The bond is strengthening," she whispered. "I can see what he sees." Alara paused in her packing, concern evident in her voice. "Is that normal?" "Nothing about this is normal," Arya replied. "The ancient texts speak of soul bonds between true mates, but those are supposed to be voluntary, formed through ritual and consent." She touched the bite mark again. "This was impulsive, instinctual." "Perhaps there's a way to break it," Alara suggested, though her tone held little hope. Arya shook her head. "The bond can only be broken by death, his or mine. And even then, the survivor often perishes from the shock." The reality of their situation settled heavily between them as the afternoon waned. By the time sunset painted the sky in colors Arya could no longer see, they had packed 2 small bundles of essentials. Alara insisted on accompanying her sister at least as far as the border, though both knew separation was inevitable. As promised, Victor awaited them at the western edge of the village, a hooded cloak concealing his features. 3 horses stood ready, their breath forming clouds in the cooling evening air. "We must hurry," the beta urged, helping Arya mount. "Thornwald has dispatched hunters to ensure you leave, but I don't trust them to simply observe." "Hunters?" Alara's alarm was evident. As a hunter herself, she knew their methods. "They wouldn't harm an exiled Omega." Victor's expression remained grim. "Thornwald fears what he doesn't understand, and your sister's healing of Lord Magnus frightens him more than the war itself." They rode in tense silence as darkness descended, Arya positioned between Victor and Alara for protection. Though blind, Arya's awareness extended beyond normal senses. She felt the moment they crossed from Silverlight territory into the unclaimed borderlands, a subtle shift in the energy around them, a lifting of one pressure and the introduction of new uncertainty. "We've crossed," she announced quietly. "I am officially exiled." The acknowledgement brought unexpected emotion. Grief for her lost home mingled with a strange sense of liberation. No longer bound by Silverlight's strictures, what might she become? The answer perhaps lay with the Alpha, whose presence grew stronger in her awareness with each passing hour. Through their fledgling bond, Arya sensed Magnus waiting ahead, his impatience and concern pulsing like a beacon. "He's near," she informed her companions. "Less than a mile north, in a clearing by water." Victor gave her an appraising look. "The bond site manifests already? Interesting." "What else aren't you telling us?" Alara demanded, protective instincts flaring. "Many things, Hunter," Victor replied evenly, "but none that will harm your sister. That I swear on my life." They found Magnus beside a small stream, his powerful frame silhouetted against the rising moon. Despite the day's ordeal, he stood tall, every inch the Alpha Lord even without his customary armor or weapons. The claiming bond flared between them as Arya approached, momentarily overwhelming her other senses with awareness of him. "You came," Magnus stated simply, his deep voice carrying easily across the clearing. "I had little choice," Arya replied, dismounting with Alara's assistance. "Exile tends to narrow one's options." Something like regret crossed Magnus's features. "For that, I cannot offer sufficient apology. The claiming was unexpected, yet not entirely unwelcome," Victor murmured, too low for any but Magnus's enhanced hearing to detect. The Alpha Lord shot his captain a warning glance before addressing Alara. "Your sister will be protected in Shadowfell territory. You have my word, as Alpha." "Your word?" Alara's laugh held no humor. The word of the enemy who bit my sister without consent and condemned her to exile? Elara, Arya placed a calming hand on her sister's arm. What's done cannot be undone. We must move forward now. Magnus approached slowly, conscious of the tension radiating from Elara. To Arya he spoke directly, his tone devoid of command. I offer you sanctuary, not subjugation. The bond between us was not of your choosing, but it need not be your prison. Through their connection, Arya sensed the truth in his words, and something more: uncertainty. The mighty Alpha Lord of Shadowfell found himself in uncharted territory, bound to an Omega from enemy lands, responsible for a situation neither had anticipated. I accept your sanctuary, Arya decided, her voice steady despite the enormity of her choice. But I am not your possession, Lord Magnus. I will make my own path, even in your territory. A hint of admiration colored Magnus's response. I would expect nothing less from the woman who banished Shadowbane from my blood. Their exchange was interrupted by Victor's low warning. Riders approaching from the south. Silverlight hunters. Elara's expression hardened with understanding. Thornwald never intended to let Arya leave alive. A dead exile creates no complications. Go, she urged her sister, pressing a final kiss to her forehead. I'll delay them. Elara, no. Trust me, her sister insisted. I know their protocols. I can lead them astray without raising suspicion. The sisters embraced once more, a lifetime of love and protection distilled into a moment. Then Elara was mounting her horse and riding south to intercept the hunters, leaving Arya truly alone among former enemies. Magnus's hand found her shoulder, steadying her as emotions threatened to overwhelm. She is brave, your sister. Brave and stubborn, Arya agreed, fighting back tears. Much like someone else I've recently met. A rare smile touched Magnus's lips, though Arya couldn't see it. She felt it instead through their strengthening bond, a warmth cutting through his customary reserve. We should move, Victor advised. Shadowfell territory lies 3 hours north, but the path is treacherous. Can you ride? Magnus asked Arya, concern evident. She nodded. I've ridden since childhood, but I'll need guidance on unfamiliar trails. Then you shall have it. Magnus helped her mount before swinging up behind her, his solid presence at her back both foreign and reassuring. His arms encircled her waist to take the reins, the casual intimacy of the position at odds with their brief acquaintance. Yet as they rode north under starlight, Arya found herself relaxing incrementally into the protection he offered. The claiming bond hummed between them, new yet ancient, unwanted yet increasingly natural. Through it, she experienced fragments of his perspective, the trail ahead, the weight of responsibility for her safety, the lingering effects of Shadowbane creating occasional bursts of disorientation. You're still not fully healed, she observed as they paused to rest the horses. The poison affected you deeply. Magnus dismounted, helping her down with careful hands. Few survive Shadowbane at all. That I live is testament to your gift. A gift that made me an outcast, Arya mused, finding a fallen log to sit upon. The night air carried the scent of pine and distant water, a landscape she would need to learn anew without sight. You were already an outcast, Magnus observed, settling beside her. I sensed it when you healed me, the isolation, the careful distance you maintained from your own people. Arya's head turned toward him in surprise. You perceived that much through our connection? The claiming bond builds on what already exists between souls, Victor explained, approaching with water from a nearby stream. Had there been true enmity between you, the bite would not have taken hold. This revelation settled between them, uncomfortable in its implications, that some inherent compatibility existed before they'd ever met, that fate or biology had deemed them matched despite 30 years of territorial hatred. Rest while you can, Magnus advised, changing the subject. The border to Shadowfell is heavily guarded. Our crossing will not be simple, even with Victor's preparations. Arya nodded, fatigue suddenly overwhelming her as the day's events caught up with her body. Wake me when it's time to move. She drifted into uneasy sleep, her dreams filled with amber-eyed wolves and ancient forests. Through the claiming bond, she sensed Magnus keeping watch, his consciousness brushing against hers in a manner both intrusive and strangely comforting. Whatever the future held, they were bound together now, healer and warrior, Omega and Alpha, united by circumstance and ancient magic neither fully understood. In the borderlands between territories, watched over by stars older than pack rivalries, Arya's exile had begun. But perhaps, she thought as consciousness faded, it was also something else entirely. A beginning. Dawn broke over the borderlands with tentative fingers of light reaching through ancient pines. Arya woke to unfamiliar sounds and scents, a stream flowing nearby, the calls of birds she couldn't name, the earthy aroma of soil different from her homeland. For a moment, disorientation threatened to overwhelm her before memory returned. Exile. The claiming bond. Magnus. Through their connection, she sensed him nearby, his presence a steady pulse at the edge of her awareness. Victor moved quietly around their small camp, his experienced hands breaking down evidence of their stay. Neither man spoke, communicating through gestures and the silent language of those long accustomed to moving through hostile territory. "We should reach Shadowfell border by midday," Magnus said, noting her wakefulness. "How do you fare this morning?" Arya touched the claiming bite at her neck, finding it hot but no longer painful. "The bond is stabilizing," she observed, rising to her feet with practiced care. "I can sense your location without trying now." Magnus approached, his footfalls deliberately audible for her benefit. "The borderlands are treacherous even for those with sight. Stay close." Though spoken as practical advice, the words carried undercurrents Arya didn't miss. The Alpha's protective instincts had engaged fully, heightened by their developing bond and her vulnerability. In Silverlight territory, such protection would have felt stifling to an independent Omega. Here, surrounded by unknown dangers, Arya found herself grateful for it. "The Thornwood lies ahead," Victor announced as they mounted their horses. "We must pass through its eastern edge to avoid Silverlight patrols." The name sent a chill through Arya. Even in Silverlight, children were warned about the Thornwood, a forest said to harbor spirits of the unquiet dead from battles fought generations ago. Some claimed these spirits were merely legend. Others insisted they were all too real, manifesting as mist wraiths that drained life from unwary travelers. "Is there no other path?" she asked, settling before Magnus on their shared mount. "None that doesn't expose us to Silverlight hunters," Magnus replied, his breath warm against her ear as he reached around her for the reins. "The Thornwood has dangers, but their dangers I understand." They rode in silence as the terrain gradually changed beneath their horses' hooves. The open meadows of the borderlands gave way to increasingly dense forest. Arya felt the shift in the air, cooler, heavier with moisture, carrying the scent of decay beneath the green. The Thornwood welcomed them with oppressive silence, even the birds falling quiet as they passed beneath its ancient canopy. "The stories say the Thornwood manifests different trials for each traveler," Arya said softly, breaking the unnerving quiet, "that it shows you your deepest fears." "The stories are not entirely wrong," Magnus acknowledged. "The forest has awareness, but fear gives it power, remember that." Victor led the way along a barely discernible trail, his decades of experience evident in his confident navigation. Though Arya couldn't see their surroundings, her other senses painted a vivid picture, branches reaching like gnarled fingers, roots snaking across the forest floor, moss hanging in thick curtains that brushed against her face as they passed. The temperature dropped noticeably as they ventured deeper. Magnus's arm tightened around her waist, a gesture of reassurance she hadn't realized she needed. Through their bond, she sensed his heightened alertness, his senses scanning continuously for threats. "There," Victor whispered suddenly, reining his horse to a stop. "Do you see it?" Arya felt Magnus tense behind her. "Yes. Keep moving, slowly. No sudden movements." "What is it?" she asked, frustration at her blindness momentarily overwhelming her usual acceptance. "Mist," Magnus explained, his voice deliberately calm. Not natural mist. It's gathering ahead of us, taking shape. Through their bond, Arya caught flickering impressions, wispy tendrils of gray-white vapor coalescing into vaguely humanoid forms, their features indistinct, yet somehow expressing profound sorrow. The wraiths of Thornwood, just as legend described. "They're blocking our path," Victor observed, hand moving to the silver dagger at his belt, one of the few materials that could disperse the entities, according to folklore. "Wait," Arya said, an idea forming. "Let me try something first." Before either man could object, she slipped from the horse, feet finding the forest floor with careful precision. The claiming bond gave her just enough visual input through Magnus's eyes to orient herself toward the ghostly figures. "What are you doing?" Magnus demanded, alarm evident in his voice as he dismounted quickly behind her. "Testing a theory," she replied, extending her hands before her. "If they're spirits of the dead, perhaps they respond to the same energy I use for healing." The air grew colder as Arya approached the wraiths, frost forming on nearby vegetation despite the summer season. Through Magnus's vision, she watched the misty figures waver, seemingly curious about her advance. "They're responding to you," Magnus observed, remaining close behind her, ready to intervene. Arya closed her useless eyes, focusing instead on her inner sight, the ability to perceive emotional energy and spiritual essence. The wraiths blazed into her awareness, their forms composed of pure emotion frozen in time, grief, rage, confusion, souls unable to move beyond their final moments of life. "They're trapped," she whispered, understanding flowing through her, caught between worlds, repeating their last experiences. With the same gentle intention she applied to healing physical wounds, Arya extended her awareness toward the nearest wraith. Its cold essence recoiled initially, then cautiously reached back, tendrils of mist brushing against her outstretched hands. Images flooded her mind. A young soldier dying far from home, his last thoughts of family never seen again. The final moments of consciousness stretching into an eternity of repetition, the same fear and regret cycling without resolution. "You can rest now," Arya told the spirit, channeling warmth and peace through her palms. "The battle ended long ago. Your fight is done." The wraith's form shimmered, its outline becoming momentarily sharper before dissolving into ordinary mist that dissipated in the forest air. Where fear and pain had radiated, now there was only silence. Magnus watched in astonishment as Arya moved to the next spirit, then the next, speaking quiet words of release to each. One by one, the wraiths faded, the oppressive atmosphere of the forest lightening with each departure. "I've never seen anything like this," Victor murmured, awe replacing his usual stoicism. "The Thornwood spirits are said to be eternal." "Nothing is eternal," Arya replied, her voice weary as she addressed the final wraith, "especially pain." As the last spirit dissolved, Arya swayed on her feet, the effort of so many healings taking its toll. Magnus was at her side instantly, strong arms supporting her weight. "That was both remarkable and foolish," he admonished gently. "You could have been harmed." "They weren't malevolent," she explained, leaning against him as strength gradually returned to her limbs. "Just lost, forgotten." Something shifted in Magnus's perception of her in that moment. A deepening respect layered atop the protective instinct already in place. Through their bond, Arya sensed his reassessment. This was no ordinary healing gift she possessed. This was something far older and more powerful than either had initially realized. They continued through the Thornwood without further supernatural encounters, though conventional dangers remained plentiful. Twice Victor led them on detours to avoid signs of predators. Once they waited in silence as a Silverlight patrol passed nearby, close enough that Arya could hear the familiar cadence of her former packmate's speech. By midday, the dense forest began to thin, sunlight breaking through in increasingly frequent patches. The air carried new scents, smoke from distant hearths, the musk of territory markers, the indefinable essence of civilization. "Shadow fell," Magnus announced, straightening in the saddle. "We've reached the border." The significance of the moment wasn't lost on Arya. She was about to enter the homeland of those she'd been raised to consider enemies, accompanied by their leader, bound to him through ancient magic neither had anticipated. Whatever life she had known before was truly over. Whatever came next would be entirely uncharted. "My people have been at war with yours for 30 years, Magnus said quietly. "They will not all welcome you, despite your bond to me." "I expect no welcome," Arya replied with pragmatic acceptance. "Only the chance to build something new." Victor rode ahead to alert the border guards to their approach, leaving Magnus and Arya momentarily alone on the forest's edge. The Alpha Lord dismounted, then helped Arya down, his hands lingering slightly longer than necessary at her waist. "There is something you should know before we cross," he said, his voice uncommonly hesitant. "Something about the claiming bond that Victor believes is happening between us." Arya turned her face toward him, pale blue eyes focusing slightly above his actual position. "You've noticed it too, then? The strengthening connection?" Magnus exhaled slowly. "It's progressing faster than ordinary bonds. When you healed the wraiths, I felt your power flowing through me as well. That shouldn't be possible without the soul bond ritual." "A soul bond?" The term triggered recognition from old stories Arya's mother had told. Tales of alpha-omega pairs with connections so profound they shared thoughts, emotions, even sensory experiences. "Those are myths, surely." "So I believed," Magnus acknowledged. "Yet here we stand. When you healed me of Shadowbane, something awakened between us that should have taken months or years to develop naturally." Arya's hand moved unconsciously to the claiming bite at her neck. "Is it dangerous?" "Potentially," he admitted. "A soul bond left incomplete can cause physical illness, mental instability. The old texts describe it as two halves seeking wholeness, a process that, once begun, cannot be safely interrupted." The implications settled heavily between them. A claiming bond could be managed with distance and boundaries. A soul bond, once fully formed, would connect them irrevocably, a lifetime commitment neither had sought. "We should discuss this further once we're safely across the border," Magnus suggested, tension evident in his voice. "Victor returns with the guard captain." 6 warriors approached on horseback, led by Victor and a stern-faced woman whose bearing marked her as a high-ranking beta. At the sight of Magnus, the guards immediately dropped to one knee, fists pressed to hearts in salute to their Alpha Lord. "Rise," Magnus commanded, his demeanor shifting subtly into the role of leader. "Captain Lyra, we require escort to the main settlement." The captain's sharp eyes moved from Magnus to Arya, nostrils flaring slightly as she detected the claiming bond between them. To her credit, her expression remained professionally neutral, despite what must have been shocking discovery. "Of course, my lord, the council has been notified of your return." Her gaze lingered on Arya. "And your companion." "My bonded," Magnus corrected firmly, "who will be accorded all appropriate respect." The subtle emphasis on bonded rather than claimed didn't escape Arya's notice. Magnus was establishing her position immediately, not as a possession or spoil of war, but as his equal partner. Whether this was diplomatic strategy or genuine sentiment remained unclear, even through their strengthening connection. The journey to Shadowfell's main settlement took several hours, during which Arya absorbed what information she could through her remaining senses. The territory smelled different from Silverlight, less pine, more oak and maple, with underlying notes of iron-rich soil. The settlement sounds that reached her ears suggested a larger population than her former home, with the steady rhythm of industry, smithing, construction, training, forming a constant backdrop. Shadowfell was built for defense, Magnus explained as they rode. 3 concentric rings of settlement, each protected by walls and guard towers. The central keep houses the council chamber, archives, and my quarters. "A fortress rather than a village," Arya observed. "Necessity shaped our architecture as it shaped our culture," he replied. 30 years of war leaves its mark." They passed through the settlement's outer gate, amid curious stares and whispered conversations that Arya's enhanced hearing caught easily. The presence of an unknown Omega riding with their Alpha sparked immediate speculation, particularly given the faint but detectable scent of their claiming bond. "They fear me," she noted quietly. "They fear what they don't understand," Magnus corrected, "which, at present, includes our situation." By the time they reached the central keep, word of their arrival had spread throughout the settlement. A crowd gathered in the main square, their collective emotion washing over Arya in waves: curiosity, suspicion, hope, resentment. Through Magnus's eyes, she caught glimpses of faces watching their progress: hardened warriors, cautious elders, wide-eyed children born knowing nothing but conflict. The Shadowfell Council awaited them in the keep's great hall, a chamber whose acoustics Arya immediately assessed through the echo of their footsteps on stone. 5 individuals stood on a raised platform, their scents marking them as 3 alphas and 2 betas of significant age and status. "Lord Magnus," greeted a deep voice directly ahead, "your return brings great relief. We feared the worst when reports of your capture reached us." "Counselor Thorn," Magnus acknowledged. "As you can see, rumors of my demise were premature." "Indeed." The counselor's tone cooled noticeably. "Though you return with unexpected company." Arya felt the weight of evaluation upon her as she stood beside Magnus, her hand resting lightly on his offered arm for guidance. She maintained the straight posture and composed expression her mother had taught her, refusing to appear intimidated despite her vulnerable position. "This is Arya of Silverlight," Magnus announced, his voice carrying to all corners of the hall. "Healer, seer, and my bonded mate." A shocked murmur rippled through the assembled council and observers. Claiming an enemy Omega during wartime was unprecedented enough. Publicly declaring her his bonded mate elevated the situation to potential political crisis. "My lord," another counselor interjected, female this time, "perhaps we might discuss these developments in private?" "There is nothing to discuss in secret, Counselor Alora," Magnus replied firmly. "Arya saved my life when I was poisoned with Shadowbane, an act that resulted in her exile from Silverlight. The claiming bond formed spontaneously during the healing. We have reason to believe it is developing into something more significant." "A soul bond?" Thorn's voice held clear disbelief. "Those are legend, not reality." "Many things once considered legend have proven otherwise," Victor spoke up from his position nearby. "I witnessed her heal Thornwood spirits with my own eyes, spirits that have resisted dissolution for generations." This revelation created even greater consternation among the council. Arya sensed their emotional responses fracturing in different directions: fear, skepticism, reluctant wonder. Regardless of the nature of their bond, Counselor Alora noted pragmatically, her presence creates complications. Silverlight will view this as abduction of one of their own. "Silverlight exiled her," Magnus countered. "She is no longer under their protection or subject to their authority." A new voice entered the discussion, elderly, female, carrying the distinctive rasp of great age. "Bring her forward. Let me see this miracle worker who draws Shadowbane poison and releases century-old spirits." Magnus guided Arya forward several steps. Through their bond, she perceived an ancient woman seated slightly apart from the other counselors. Despite her advanced years, power radiated from her in waves that Arya's spiritual sensitivity detected clearly. "Elder Orion," Magnus said respectfully, "this is Arya." The old woman's scent reached Arya: herbs, ash, and something indefinably ancient. "You're blind," Elder Orion observed directly. "Yet you see more than most with functioning eyes, don't you, child?" "I see what matters," Arya replied simply. "Hearts, intentions, spirits." Elder Orion made a sound of interest low in her throat. "And what do you see when you look upon our Alpha Lord with your special sight?" The question was a test, its implications extending beyond mere curiosity. Arya considered her response carefully, aware that her words would be judged by all present. "I see a protector," she said finally. someone who carries the weight of many lives upon his shoulders, who has known profound loss yet continues to stand between his people and harm. She paused before adding, someone whose spirit recognized mine before either of us understood why. A heavy silence followed her words. Through Magnus, Arya sensed Elder Orion's intense scrutiny, the ancient woman's eyes narrowing in thought. Interesting, the elder pronounced at last. The girl speaks truth as she perceives it, at least. She turned her attention to Magnus. You believe this developing bond to be a soul bond? Based on what evidence? Shared sensory experiences, Magnus replied. Emotional transference, enhanced healing capabilities, all emerging within hours rather than the months typically required for claiming bonds to mature. Elder Orion nodded slowly. Then you understand the risks of an incomplete soul bond. I do. And you understand what completion requires? Magnus's discomfort radiated through their connection, though his external demeanor remained composed. The ancient ritual during the full moon, yes. Which arrives in 3 days, Elder Orion noted with significant emphasis. Convenient timing, some might say. The underlying implication was clear even to Arya, who lacked context for Shadowfell's internal politics. The timing of their bond's formation and the approaching full moon carried significance beyond mere coincidence in the Elder's view. Until then, Elder Orion continued, the Omega remains under protection of the Alpha's household. Her tone shifted, addressing the broader council. We have more pressing matters to discuss. Silverlight forces have been mobilizing near the eastern boundary. Our scouts report unusual movements suggesting preparation for significant action. The conversation turned to military matters, strategy and defense, taking precedence over the personal situation of Magnus and his unexpected bondmate. Arya listened carefully, building a mental map of the political landscape she had entered. It became quickly apparent that despite 30 years of conflict, neither territory truly understood the other's motives or ultimate objectives. When the council session concluded, Magnus guided Arya through the keep's stone corridors toward the private wing reserved for the Alpha's household. Their footsteps echoed off walls that felt close around them, the space considerably more confined than the airy structures of Silverlight. Your council fears me, Arya observed once they were alone. They fear change, Magnus corrected, his voice weary. The war has defined us for so long that peace seems more threatening than continued conflict. Is that why they reacted so strongly to our bond? Because it represents change? Magnus paused before a heavy door, which creaked open at his touch. Partly, but there's more to their concern than that. The room they entered carried his scent strongly, leather, wood smoke, and the distinctive musk of Alpha. Through his eyes, Arya glimpsed sparse but quality furnishings, a large bed, weapons mounted on walls, shelves lined with books and scrolls. These are my private quarters, he explained somewhat awkwardly. You'll be safe here while arrangements are made for more permanent accommodation. Arya moved carefully forward, hands extended to map her surroundings through touch. You mentioned risks of an incomplete soul bond. What exactly happens if the bond isn't finalized? Magnus's discomfort pulsed through their connection. According to the ancient texts, an initiated soul bond creates a dependency between the paired energies. If left incomplete, the imbalance eventually manifests as physical illness, progressing to mental deterioration, and ultimately, death. How cheerful, Arya remarked with unexpected dark humor. And completion requires this ritual Elder Orion mentioned? The lunar conjunction, Magnus confirmed. A ceremony dating back to pre-war times, rarely performed in recent generations. His hesitation was palpable before he continued. It involves a physical union under the full moon, with specific ritual elements overseen by pack elders. Understanding dawned on Arya, her cheeks warming slightly. You mean consummation? A public one at that? Traditionally, yes, though certain aspects have been modified over time for privacy. His discomfort shifted to something closer to resolve. But I want to be clear, Arya. Despite what Elder Orion implies, I will not hold you to this ritual if it's not your choice. We can seek alternatives." Arya considered his words, appreciating the respect they represented while recognizing their practical limitations. "Are there alternatives? Truly?" The silence that followed provided answer enough. Through their strengthening bond, she sensed his conflicted emotions: responsibility as alpha to protect her well-being, reluctance to pressure her into greater intimacy, and underneath it all, an undeniable pull toward her that matched what she increasingly felt toward him. "We have 3 days," she said finally. "Perhaps in that time we'll discover another option. Or perhaps—" She left the thought unfinished, her practical nature acknowledging possibilities her conscious mind wasn't yet ready to articulate. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Magnus opened it to admit a young beta woman carrying clothing and supplies. Through their bond, Arya perceived a girl perhaps 16 years old, her manner deferential but curious. "Serena," Magnus greeted her. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Of course, my lord," the girl replied, her voice carrying the lilt of Shadowfell's northern region. "I've brought everything you requested for Lady Arya." "I'm no lady," Arya corrected gently. "Just Arya will do." Serena's surprise registered in the brief pause before she responded. "As you wish, Arya. I've been assigned as your attendant during your stay. I can help you learn the keep's layout and assist with whatever you need." The thoughtfulness of the arrangement touched Arya. Magnus had considered her practical needs without being asked, recognizing the challenges her blindness would present in unfamiliar surroundings. "Thank you, Serena. I would appreciate guidance in getting acquainted with my new home." The word home fell from her lips without conscious thought, yet felt strangely right despite everything. Through their bond, she sensed Magnus's pleased reaction to her characterization of Shadowfell. "I'll leave you to settle in," he said, moving toward the door. "Council matters require my attention, but Serena knows how to reach me if needed." After his departure, Arya allowed herself to truly exhale for the first time since entering Shadowfell territory. The events of the past day had unfolded with such speed that she'd had little opportunity to process their magnitude. Exile, a developing soul bond with an enemy alpha, arrival in a hostile territory. Any one of these changes would have been overwhelming alone. "May I speak freely?" Serena asked as she helped Arya change from travel-worn clothes into the clean garments she'd brought. "Please do," Arya encouraged, sensing the girl had much to say. "Everyone's talking about you," Serena admitted, her young voice carrying equal measures of awe and concern. "Some say you bewitched Lord Magnus to gain entry to our territory. Others claim you're a peace offering from Silverlight. The truth seems more interesting than either." Arya smiled faintly at the girl's directness. "The truth is rarely what rumors suggest. Magnus and I are both adapting to circumstances neither of us planned." "Is it true you can see spirits and heal Shadowbane poison?" "I perceive energy others cannot," Arya explained, finding Serena's straightforward curiosity refreshing after the Council's guarded suspicion. "As for the Shadowbane, I was fortunate. The healing could easily have failed." "You're being modest," Serena observed with surprising insight. "Elder Orion says your gift is ancient magic returning. She's been predicting it for years, the emergence of Omega healers with powers not seen since before the war." This revelation caught Arya's attention. "Elder Orion has spoken of this specifically?" "Oh yes," Serena confirmed, helping Arya navigate to a washing basin. "She says the long winter is ending, whatever that means. The elders often speak in riddles." As Serena guided her through basic orientation to Magnus's quarters, Arya absorbed both information and implications. The elders' foreknowledge suggested her arrival was perhaps less surprising to some than it appeared. Combined with the conveniently timed full moon, Arya began to suspect larger forces at work than mere coincidence. Later, as evening approached, Serena led Arya through the keep's corridors to a small garden enclosed within the central courtyard. The space provided welcome relief from stone walls and stale air, filled with herbs whose scents Arya recognized from healing practice, lavender, rosemary, thyme, and rarer medicinal plants. "This is Elder Orion's private garden," Serena explained, as Arya's fingers brushed against the plants, identifying them by touch and scent. "She instructed me to bring you here at sunset." As if summoned by her name, the ancient woman's distinctive scent approached from a nearby path. "Leave us, child," Elder Orion instructed Serena, who departed with a quick squeeze of Arya's hand. Silence stretched between the blind Omega and the Elder as Arya continued her exploration of the garden, fingers moving deftly among the plants with the confidence of someone familiar with their properties. "You know your herbs," Elder Orion observed finally. "Traditional healing, not just your special gift." "My mother taught me," Arya replied, identifying a rare moonflower by its distinctive velvety leaves, "before she and my father were killed in the borderlands." "Selene," Elder Orion said unexpectedly. "Your mother's name was Selene, was it not?" Arya's hands stilled among the herbs. "How could you know that?" "Because Selene was born in Shadowfell, not Silverlight," came the astounding reply. "She was my apprentice before she left our territory 32 years ago." The revelation struck Arya like physical impact. "That's impossible. My mother was Silverlight." "She was a healer with unusual gifts," Elder Orion interrupted. "Gifts that frightened some within our pack, particularly after she predicted the coming war. She fled with your father, rather than face those who wished to control her abilities." Arya's mind raced, reassessing everything she'd believed about her origins. "If what you say is true, then I'm of mixed blood," Elder Orion confirmed. "Neither fully Silverlight nor Shadowfell, but something new, just as this bond forming between you and Magnus represents something beyond our tired divisions." "You knew this would happen," Arya realized, pieces falling into place. "That's why you weren't surprised by news of our bond." "I knew Selene's daughter would return when the time was right," the Elder admitted, "though I confess the manner of your arrival was unexpected. The soul bond is a complication even I didn't foresee." "A complication or an opportunity?" Arya challenged, her practical nature asserting itself through shock. "You speak of the long winter ending. What exactly does that mean for Magnus and me?" Elder Orion's dry chuckle held genuine amusement. "Direct, like your mother. Good." Her tone sobered. "The soul bond between Alpha and Omega once served a crucial purpose in our society. It balanced power, ensuring neither strength nor healing dominated our culture. When the war began, such bonds ceased forming naturally. The hate between territories prevented the recognition of compatible spirits." "Until now," Arya surmised. "Until now," Elder Orion agreed. "Your bond with Magnus represents the first natural soul pairing in 3 decades. Its implications extend far beyond your personal connection." "You believe it could help end the war," Arya concluded, "a symbolic union of territories." "More than symbolic," the Elder corrected. "A soul-bonded pair shares not only emotion and sensation, but eventually power as well. Together, you and Magnus could accomplish what neither could alone, truly heal the rift between our peoples." The weight of implication settled over Arya like a physical mantle. What had begun as an unexpected claiming bite now carried the burden of historical significance far beyond personal choice. The bond that had formed by accident might prove purposeful in ways neither she nor Magnus had imagined. "Does Magnus know this?" she asked finally. "He knows pieces," Elder Orion replied. "The full truth will be his to discover alongside you, should you choose to complete the bond." "If I don't?" "Then the sickness will begin within weeks," the Elder said bluntly. "For both of you. By the next full moon, the deterioration will be noticeable. By the one following, irreversible." Arya absorbed this harsh reality with outward calm, though her mind raced with implications. "So my choices are complete, a bond I never sought with a man I barely know, or suffer progressive illness ending in death." "When framed that way, it does sound rather grim," Elder Orion acknowledged with unexpected dryness. "But consider this perspective instead. Fate has matched you with perhaps the only alpha strong enough to protect your gift during dangerous times, and given you both an opportunity to heal not just each other, but two societies locked in pointless conflict. Put that way, the situation took on a different character. Less personal imposition, more cosmic opportunity. Arya wasn't certain which framing she preferred, but appreciated the elders' straightforward approach. Their conversation was interrupted by approaching footsteps, multiple sets, moving with urgency. Through the claiming bond, Arya sensed Magnus's tension before he spoke. "Elder Orion, Arya, forgive the intrusion," he said, his voice tight with controlled alarm. "There's been an incident at the eastern border. Silverlight forces attacked our outpost at dusk." "Casualties?" Elder Orion asked sharply. 3 dead, 7 wounded, Magnus reported, and they took captives, including Victor. Arya felt his distress pulse through their bond. Victor wasn't merely a captain to Magnus, but a friend and advisor who had stood by him through decades of conflict. His capture represented both personal and strategic loss. "This is unlike Silverlight tactics," Arya observed, her knowledge of her former territory's military approach suddenly valuable. "They don't typically take captives or attack at dusk." "Unless they're sending a message," Magnus replied grimly, "or following new leadership." A thought occurred to Arya suddenly, a connection she should have made sooner. "Thornwald feared me," she said slowly, "or more specifically, feared what I represented. What if this attack is related to my exile, a show of force to counteract the perceived weakness of letting me go?" Magnus considered this perspective. "Possible. Thornwald has always been a traditionalist, viewing any deviation from established practice as vulnerability. Whatever the motivation, Council must be informed immediately," Elder Orion stated, already moving toward the keep with surprising agility for her age. "This escalation cannot go unanswered." As they followed, Arya reached for Magnus's arm, drawing him momentarily aside. "Let me help," she said quietly. "I know Silverlight's strategy, patrol patterns, weaknesses. If Victor has been taken, I want to assist in planning his recovery." Surprise and gratitude flowed through their bond. "You would help rescue a Shadowfell warrior?" "I would help rescue someone who protected me in the borderlands," she corrected, "and demonstrate my loyalty to my new home in the process." Magnus's hand covered hers briefly where it rested on his arm. "Your insight would be valuable, though not all counselors will welcome your involvement." "I don't require their welcome," Arya replied with quiet determination. "Only their attention." The emergency council session that followed proved challenging even for Magnus's authority. Emotions ran high as reports of the attack circulated, with several counselors openly suggesting Arya's arrival and the attack were connected. "Perhaps she's a spy," Counselor Thorne suggested, making no effort to lower his voice despite Arya's presence. "Sent to distract our alpha while Silverlight strikes." "A spy who healed me of Shadowbane poison instead of letting me die?" Magnus countered, anger edging his voice. "Your theory lacks logic, Counselor." "What of the captives?" Counselor Alora interjected, redirecting the conversation to more productive channels. "Do we know where they've been taken?" "Our scouts tracked them to an encampment 6 miles within Silverlight territory," reported a Beta commander named Thaddeus, his gravelly voice reflecting decades of battlefield experience. "Heavily guarded. A direct assault would be costly." "Then we don't assault directly," Arya spoke up, drawing all attention. "Silverlight's eastern border patrols follow predictable patterns. I grew up observing them from our cottage near the boundary." Silence fell as the council registered both her knowledge and her willingness to share it against her birth territory. Through Magnus, Arya sensed their reassessment, suspicion giving way to cautious interest. "Continue," Elder Orion encouraged when no one else spoke. Arya outlined the patrol schedules she'd observed over years, identifying a vulnerability in Silverlight's eastern defensive formation. "They rotate guards at midnight, with a 10-minute window when coverage is thinnest. A small team could infiltrate during that gap with minimal risk." "And you know this how exactly?" Thorne demanded. "My sister was a hunter," Arya explained simply. "She trained with the Border Patrol. Their patterns haven't changed in 15 years." The tactical discussion continued late into the night, with Arya's knowledge of Silverlight territory proving increasingly valuable. By session's end, a rescue plan had formed around her insights. a small team would infiltrate during the midnight guard change, locate the captives, and extract them before Silverlight forces could organize a response. "I should go with them," Arya suggested as she and Magnus returned to his quarters afterward. "My knowledge of Silverlight could prove crucial if complications arise." "Absolutely not," Magnus replied with uncharacteristic sharpness. "The risk is too great." "Because I'm blind, or because you don't fully trust me?" "Because you're essential," he countered, surprising her. Through their bond, she sensed no deception in his words. "Your value extends far beyond this single mission, Arya. And yes, because I couldn't guarantee your safety behind enemy lines." The protection inherent in his response might once have irritated her. Now, understanding the developing soul bond between them, Arya recognized it as something more complex, concern for her well-being intertwined with strategic assessment of her broader importance. "Then promise me one thing," she requested. "When you find Victor, check for others who might be held captive. My sister planned to delay Silverlight hunters to cover our escape. If she was discovered helping us..." Understanding flowed through their bond. "If Alara is there, we'll bring her out," Magnus promised. "You have my word." That night, as Magnus prepared with his warriors for the rescue mission, Arya remained in his quarters, mind too active for sleep despite physical exhaustion. Through their strengthening bond, she tracked his emotions, determination, concern for his captured men, underlying anger at Silverlight's provocation. When he departed with the rescue party shortly before midnight, Arya felt the physical distance between them with unexpected intensity. Their bond stretched but held, allowing her faint awareness of his location, even as miles separated them. She settled into meditative stillness, using techniques her mother had taught for focusing healing energy, directing supportive intention toward Magnus and his warriors. Hours passed in this state of heightened awareness. Occasionally, flashes of Magnus's experience reached her. Tension during border crossing, the silhouette of a Silverlight outpost against starlight, the careful advance of warriors moving in perfect coordination. The soul bond was strengthening rapidly now, sharing sensory experiences despite separation. Near dawn, Arya jolted from meditation as a surge of adrenaline shot through the bond. Magnus was engaging in combat. Through fragmented impressions, she perceived a guardhouse, the clash of weapons, his fierce concentration as he fought to reach captured packmates. Then, sudden recognition, a familiar scent, a voice he knew only through Arya's memories. Alara, bound alongside Victor and other Shadowfell captives, injured but alive. Relief flooded the bond from both sides as Magnus secured the prisoners and began the withdrawal. Arya remained focused on their connection, lending what support she could through the intangible link between them. When the rescue party crossed safely back into Shadowfell territory as dawn broke, she finally allowed herself to relax. Magnus returned to their quarters mid-morning, fatigue evident in his movements, but satisfaction pulsing through their bond. "The mission succeeded," he reported, sinking onto a chair nearby. "All captives recovered, including your sister." "Alara is here? In Shadowfell?" Arya could scarcely believe it. "Being treated for injuries in the healing quarters," Magnus confirmed. "She was caught helping delay Silverlight hunters, just as you feared. Thornwald ordered her imprisoned alongside Victor when he discovered her involvement in your escape." Arya moved toward the door immediately. "I need to see her." "Of course." Magnus rose despite obvious exhaustion. "I'll take you to her." The healing quarters occupied the western wing of the keep, a series of rooms filled with medicinal scents familiar to Arya from her own practice. Magnus guided her to a quiet chamber where several patients rested, their breathing indicating various states of recovery. "Arya?" Alara's voice, weakened but unmistakable, came from nearby. Arya followed the sound, hands finding her sister's bandaged form on a narrow bed. "I'm here," she assured her, fingers gently assessing injuries through touch. "What happened?" "Thornwald's hunters," Alara replied grimly. "They suspected I helped you escape. When they found evidence..." She didn't need to finish the thought. Silverlight's punishment for traitors was notoriously harsh. "You're safe now," Arya promised, healing energy flowing instinctively from her palms into her sister's wounded body. Through her special perception, she assessed the damage: broken ribs, lacerations, internal bruising. Serious, but treatable. In enemy territory? Hardly safe, Elara observed with a shadow of her usual dry humor. It's not what we were taught, Arya admitted. Shadowfell is different than the stories. Through their bond, Magnus observed the sisters' reunion with complex emotions: satisfaction at having fulfilled his promise, strategic awareness of Elara's potential value as a source of intelligence, and underlying all, pleasure at Arya's evident relief. The dynamics between them were shifting rapidly now, their connection deepening with each passing hour. As the second day of Arya's residence in Shadowfell territory drew to a close, the approaching full moon cast its significance over their developing relationship. Soon, they would face the choice Elder Orion had outlined: complete the soul bond through ancient ritual, or begin the slow decline into illness and eventual death. For now, however, they existed in the liminal space between decision points. Arya tending her injured sister, Magnus managing the political fallout of the raid, both aware of the other's presence through their strengthening bond. Whatever came next would be determined not just by personal choice, but by the complex interplay of politics, ancient magic, and the long shadow of a war that had defined both territories for generations. In the quiet moments between crises, when their bond hummed with peaceful connection, both sensed the potential their union represented, not just for themselves, but for two societies that had forgotten how to exist without enmity. The question that remained, hanging unspoken between them, was whether they were prepared to embrace that potential, with all its intimate implications and public responsibilities. The full moon approached, bringing with it the moment of decision neither could ultimately avoid. The day of the full moon arrived with oppressive inevitability. Arya woke before dawn, the silver-blue moonlight still filtering through the high window of the chamber she now occupied adjacent to Magnus's quarters. Even without sight, she sensed the moon's power, an ancient pull that resonated with the developing bond inside her. 3 days had passed since her arrival in Shadowfell. 3 days of rapid adjustment to new surroundings, political tensions, and the increasingly undeniable connection forming between her and Magnus. The claiming bond had evolved with alarming speed, progressing beyond simple awareness of each other's locations to frequent sharing of sensory experiences and emotional states. This morning, she found herself momentarily disoriented, uncertain whether the ceiling she saw was through her own perception or Magnus's eyes from his adjacent chamber. Such merging of consciousness had been occurring more frequently, brief moments when the boundaries between their separate selves blurred without warning. The soul bond accelerates, Elder Orion had explained the previous evening during a private consultation. Your compatibility is unusually strong. The ritual tonight is not merely advisable, it has become essential. Arya rose from bed, bare feet finding the cool stone floor as she oriented herself within the unfamiliar space. After 3 days, she had memorized the layout of her quarters and could navigate without assistance, a small victory of independence in her radically altered circumstances. Her fingers found the claiming bite at her neck, now fully healed but permanently marked in the distinctive pattern of Magnus's teeth. The physical reminder of their unexpected connection felt warm beneath her touch, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called, reaching for a robe to cover her nightclothes. "Good morning," came Serena's cheerful voice as the young beta entered with a tray. "I've brought breakfast and special preparations for today." The hesitation in her tone conveyed volumes. Everyone in the keep knew what this day represented: the full moon, the soul bond ritual, the formal union of their Alpha Lord with the former Silverlight Omega. "Thank you, Serena." Arya accepted the tray, catching the scent of fresh bread and herbal tea. "What special preparations does this momentous day require?" "Elder Orion sent ceremonial herbs for your bath," Serena explained, moving to prepare water in the adjoining washing chamber. "And there's a traditional gown being completed for tonight's ceremony." Arya nodded, keeping her expression neutral despite the flutter of nervous anticipation in her stomach. The ritual loomed before her, a commitment she hadn't sought but couldn't safely avoid, binding her permanently to a man she'd known barely a week, yet felt connected to in ways that defied rational explanation. "How is my sister this morning?" she asked, deliberately changing the subject as she sipped the fragrant tea. "Healing well," Serena replied. "The beta captain, Victor, has been keeping her company. They seem to have formed a bond during their shared captivity." This information sparked Arya's interest. "What kind of bond?" "The respectful kind," Serena clarified with a touch of humor. "Though I've never seen the captain so attentive to anyone's recovery before. He brings her meals personally." The detail provided welcome distraction from Arya's own situation. Since the rescue, Ilara had been recovering in the healing quarters, initially suspicious of Shadowfell hospitality, but gradually adjusting to her unexpected refuge. If she had found an ally in Victor, her adaptation might proceed more smoothly. As Serena prepared her bath with the ceremonial herbs, Arya felt Magnus stir to wakefulness through their bond. His consciousness brushed against hers like a physical touch, bringing awareness of his location and general state without words. She sensed his similar preoccupation with the coming night, tension and anticipation mingling in his emotional signature. "Lord Magnus requests your presence in the council chamber after you've prepared for the day," Serena mentioned as she helped Arya into the herb-infused bath. "Something about border reports." The water enveloped Arya in soothing warmth, the ceremonial herbs releasing aromatic oils that tingled against her skin. Lavender and sage for purification, rose for opening the heart, and moonflower to enhance spiritual connectivity. Traditional elements for an omega preparing for bonding. "Do you believe in soul bonds, Serena?" Arya asked suddenly, curious about the young beta's perspective. "I never did before," the girl admitted, helping to wash Arya's long chestnut hair. "They seemed like stories for children, but watching you and Lord Magnus these past days..." She paused thoughtfully. "The way you move in coordination without speaking, how you sometimes respond to thoughts he hasn't voiced aloud. It makes the old legends seem possible." Arya absorbed this observation, recognizing the truth in it. She and Magnus had developed nonverbal communication that others noticed, anticipating each other's needs and completing each other's thoughts with increasing frequency. What had begun as an accidental claiming was undeniably evolving into something profound. After bathing in the ceremonial herbs, Arya dressed in a simple blue gown Serena had selected, its fabric softer than anything available in Silverlight. Shadowfell, she was discovering, had trading relationships with distant territories that provided luxuries her former home had foregone during the Long War. Serena guided her through the keep's stone corridors to the council chamber, where Magnus awaited with several advisors. Through their bond, Arya sensed his awareness of her approach before she entered the room, his attention shifting in her direction despite ongoing conversation. "Arya," he greeted as she entered, his deep voice carrying complex undercurrents only she could detect through their connection. "Thank you for joining us." She inclined her head in acknowledgement, moving with practiced confidence to the chair he mentally indicated through their bond. Such silent communication had become routine between them, a practical advantage of their developing connection. "We were discussing the border situation," Magnus explained, resuming the meeting. "Silverlight forces have withdrawn from the eastern outposts following our rescue operation, but scout reports indicate unusual activity to the north." "Thornwald redistributing forces," Arya suggested, drawing on her knowledge of Silverlight tactics. "He'll want to appear strong despite the embarrassment of losing prisoners." The strategic discussion continued, Arya contributing insights about Silverlight's likely responses and vulnerabilities. Though she had never participated in military planning before, her lifetime of observation from the periphery had granted her unique perspective. Through Magnus, she sensed the Council's grudging appreciation for her contributions. As the meeting concluded, the other advisors departed, leaving Magnus and Arya momentarily alone in the high-ceilinged chamber. "You slept poorly," he observed, moving to stand beside her chair. "As did you," she countered, aware of his restless night through their bond. A silence stretched between them, laden with unspoken thoughts about the evening ahead. Through their connection, Each sensed the other's uncertainty mixed with reluctant anticipation. "I've been researching alternatives," Magnus finally admitted. "Ancient texts in the archives, consulting with Elder Orion. There is no other way to stabilize the bond once it's progressed this far." "I know," Arya replied simply. Her practical nature had already accepted this reality. "I've made my peace with it." Magnus's hand found hers, the physical contact intensifying their connection instantly. Through the touch, his concern flowed directly to her awareness. "You understand what the ritual entails, the public aspects, the private completion?" The delicate reference to physical consummation brought warmth to Arya's cheeks despite her composure. "Elder Orion has explained the process thoroughly." His thumb traced small circles against her palm, the simple gesture somehow more intimate than words. In different circumstances, this would have unfolded differently, more gradually. "In different circumstances, we would never have met at all," Arya pointed out pragmatically. "We adapt to the reality before us, not the possibilities that never were." Through their bond, she sensed his appreciation for her straightforward perspective. In this, they were well matched, both preferring direct confrontation of challenges rather than useless hypotheticals. "Elder Orion believes our bond serves a greater purpose," Magnus said, shifting topics slightly. "Beyond personal connection. The reconciliation of our territories," Arya nodded. "She shared similar thoughts with me." "And what do you think of her theory?" His question carried genuine interest in her perspective. Arya considered before responding. "I think 30 years of hatred won't dissolve overnight, regardless of symbolic unions. But I also believe in healing, of bodies, spirits, and perhaps even territories." Magnus's satisfaction with her answer radiated through their bond. "A realistic yet hopeful assessment. We are well matched in this, at least." The acknowledgement hung between them, a recognition that despite the circumstances forcing their union, genuine compatibility existed. Whether through fate, biology, or simple coincidence, their spirits resonated together in ways neither could deny. Their moment of connection was interrupted by approaching footsteps. Elder Orion entered without ceremony, her ancient presence commanding attention despite her diminutive stature. "The preparations proceed," she announced without preamble. "Tonight's ritual must begin precisely at moonrise." Her attention focused on Arya. "Come, child. There are traditions to observe before evening." Magnus reluctantly released Arya's hand, his regret at their separation pulsing briefly through their bond. "Until moonrise, then," he said, his formal tone belied by the warmth in their connection. Elder Orion led Arya from the council chamber toward the keep's eastern tower, where traditional ceremonies were conducted. As they walked, the ancient woman's silence created space for Arya's thoughts to settle. "You have questions," the elder observed finally. "Ask them now, while we have privacy." Arya appreciated the directness. "You knew my mother well?" "As well as anyone could know Celine," Elder Orion replied, a note of fondness warming her typically austere tone. "She was brilliant, stubborn, and possessed of gifts that frightened those in power." "Gifts like mine?" "Similar, though differently expressed. Where you heal physical and spiritual ailments, she saw potential futures, branching paths of possibility. A dangerous ability during uncertain times." They reached the eastern tower, climbing worn stone steps to a circular chamber high above the main keep. The room smelled of herbs and ancient magic. Incense burned in ceremonies spanning generations, leaving residual energy Arya's sensitivity detected instantly. "This is the ritual chamber," Elder Orion explained. "Tonight, you and Magnus will complete the soul bond here, beneath the full moon through the central skylight." Arya oriented herself within the space, hands extended to map dimensions and features. The circular room contained a raised dais at its center, positioned precisely beneath an open skylight that would channel moonlight directly downward at the moon's zenith. "The ritual has 3 phases," Elder Orion continued, moving to prepare elements around the chamber. The acknowledgement, witnessed by council and pack representatives, the blessing performed by me as elder, and the completion, which occurs privately after the witnesses withdraw. The clinical description did little to diminish the gravity of what awaited. Arya understood the implications. A public declaration followed by intimate consummation of their bond, transforming their accidental connection into permanent, irrevocable union. And if we complete this ritual, what then? Arya asked the question that had occupied her thoughts throughout the previous days. What does it mean for Shadowfell and Silverlight? That depends on choices made afterward, Elder Orion replied cryptically. The soul bond provides potential, not certainty. How you and Magnus employ its power remains your decision. As the elder instructed her in the ceremonial words and movements required for the evening ritual, Arya's thoughts drifted to Magnus. Through their connection, she sensed him in the training yards below, working through physical exertion to manage the tension of anticipation. His consciousness registered her attention, acknowledging her presence in his awareness with warm recognition. The hours passed in preparation and instruction. By late afternoon, Arya had been ritually bathed a second time, dressed in the ceremonial gown crafted for the occasion, and adorned with symbolic jewelry representing Omega wisdom and receptivity. The gown itself felt lighter than expected, flowing silk that moved like water around her body, embroidered with ancient symbols she could feel beneath her sensitive fingertips. As sunset approached, Alara visited briefly, having been granted permission to attend the evening ceremony despite her status as a Silverlight exile. "Are you certain about this?" her sister asked when they were momentarily alone in Arya's preparation chamber. "Bonding permanently to the Alpha Lord of Shadowfell is significant." "I'm already bonded to him," Arya reminded her practically. "Tonight merely formalizes what began in the market cage." "There's a difference between claiming and soul bonding," Alara countered. "One is biological, the other is more." "I know." Arya touched her sister's hand reassuringly. "But the bond is already forming, with or without ritual. This way, at least, we control its completion rather than suffering its incompletion." Alara sighed, concern evident in her voice. "You've always been pragmatic. Even as a child, you accepted difficult truths better than most adults." "A useful trait in current circumstances," Arya observed with a faint smile. They embraced before Alara departed to join the witnesses gathering for the ceremony. Left alone briefly, Arya centered herself through meditation, focusing on the bond that had brought such unexpected change to her life. Through it, she sensed Magnus undergoing his own preparations in a separate chamber. His emotions flowed clearly to her awareness, determination, responsibility, and beneath those stronger currents, a thread of genuine anticipation. Whatever circumstances had forced their union, he had come to value their connection on its own merits. As moonrise approached, Serena returned to escort Arya to the ritual chamber. The keep had fallen into expectant silence, daily activities suspended for the momentous occasion. Shadowfell had not witnessed an Alpha Lord's bonding ceremony in decades, not since Magnus's father had taken his mate before the current war began. The ritual chamber had transformed during Arya's absence. Through Magnus's eyes, she glimpsed the space as she entered, floor strewn with aromatic herbs, ceremonial fire burning in 4 corners, representing the cardinal directions, witnesses arranged in a circle around the central dais where Magnus awaited. Council members occupied the innermost positions, with pack representatives behind them, creating concentric circles of observance. Arya moved forward with measured steps, guided by Serena until she reached the edge of the gathering. Though blind, she felt the collective attention upon her. Curiosity, skepticism, and reluctant hope from the assembled Shadowfell pack. A path cleared before her, leading to the central dais where Magnus stood beneath the open skylight. The rising full moon had not yet reached the opening, but its light spilled into the chamber through high windows, casting everything in silver illumination. Through their bond, Magnus extended awareness toward her, a spiritual hand reaching to guide her forward. Arya accepted the connection, using his vision to navigate the final steps to the dais unassisted, a demonstration of their already functioning bond that drew murmurs from the witnesses. She ascended the 3 steps to stand before him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. Through their connection, she perceived him clearly, dressed in ceremonial alpha attire, his powerful frame accentuated by the formal clothing, silver streaking his dark hair caught in moonlight. Elder Orion stepped forward, her ancient voice carrying surprising strength as she addressed the gathering. "We convene under the full moon to witness the completion of a soul bond between Alpha and Omega, Magnus and Arya. This bond, begun through claiming, now seeks consummation through ancient ritual." The ceremonial fire in the corners flared higher at her words, responding to energy gathering in the chamber. Arya sensed the accumulation of power, not merely symbolic but genuinely metaphysical, the collective attention of the witnesses focusing the moon's influence. "In the time before territories, before borders divided our kind," Elder Orion continued, "soul bonds between Alpha and Omega maintained balance between strength and wisdom, protection and healing. Tonight, we witness the return of that tradition." The ritual proceeded through ancient formulaic exchanges, Magnus and Arya responding to Elder Orion's ceremonial questions with predetermined answers that echoed through the stone chamber. The witnesses observed in silence as the bond between them was formally acknowledged before pack and council. When the moon reached the position where its light poured directly through the skylight onto the central dais, Elder Orion raised her hands for the blessing phase of the ritual. "Magnus, Alpha Lord of Shadowfell, do you acknowledge this bond forming between your spirit and Arya's, accepting its privileges and responsibilities under pack law?" "I acknowledge and accept," Magnus responded, his deep voice resonating with authority and commitment. "Arya, Omega Healer, do you acknowledge this bond forming between your spirit and Magnus's, accepting its privileges and responsibilities under pack law?" "I acknowledge and accept," Arya replied, her clear voice carrying throughout the chamber. Elder Orion placed one gnarled hand on each of their foreheads, completing the circuit of energy between them. "Then by moonlight and ancient power, before witnesses of pack and council, I recognize this soul bond as legitimate and binding." The moment her hands connected them, Arya felt a surge of energy unlike anything she'd experienced before. The claiming bond, already strong, intensified exponentially as the ritual magic engaged with their natural connection. Magnus's consciousness brushed against hers with new clarity, emotions and sensations flowing freely between them. Through his eyes, Arya saw herself as he perceived her, luminous in the moonlight, strength and beauty combined in ways she'd never recognized in herself. Simultaneously, Magnus experienced her perception of him, not just physical appearance, but the essence she sensed beneath, the protective spirit and burden of leadership he carried. For several heartbeats, they existed in perfect synchronization, each fully aware of the other's complete being. The witnesses faded from awareness as their bond temporarily overwhelmed external stimuli, creating a private universe of connection between them alone. When Elder Orion removed her hands, breaking the intensified circuit, both swayed slightly at the sudden return to normal awareness. The elder turned to address the witnesses, her voice carrying formal authority. "The acknowledgement and blessing are complete. The bond is recognized by Pack and Moon. Witnesses may now withdraw for the completion to proceed in privacy." The assembled pack members departed in formal procession, council members last among them, until only Elder Orion remained with Magnus and Arya on the central dais, moonlight still bathing them in silver. "The final phase requires no witness," the elder reminded them quietly. "The moon alone observes the physical completion of what has begun in spirit." With those words, she too departed, closing the heavy wooden door behind her. The circular chamber fell into silence, broken only by the crackling of ceremonial fires in the corners and the sound of their synchronized breathing. Alone together beneath the full moon, Magnus and Arya faced the culmination of a journey neither had anticipated when their paths first crossed in the Silverlight market cage. Through their strengthened bond, uncertainty and anticipation flowed freely between them, neither able to conceal their thoughts from the other. "This is not how I imagined finding a mate," Magnus admitted, breaking the silence. His hand reached to brush a strand of hair from Arya's face, the simple contact sending ripples of awareness through their connection. "Nor I," she acknowledged. "Yet here we stand, already more connected than most who choose each other deliberately." Their bond hummed between them, conveying emotions too complex for words. Magnus's fingers traced the line of her jaw with gentle reverence, both experiencing the touch from giving and receiving perspectives simultaneously through their shared awareness. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "regardless of circumstances forcing this union, I have come to value what exists between us. Not just the bond, but the person you are." The sincere admission touched Arya deeply, her own feelings reflecting his. Despite the compressed time frame and external pressures, genuine appreciation had developed between them, respect for each other's strengths, understanding of vulnerabilities, recognition of complementary qualities. "I feel the same," she replied simply, her hand finding his chest above his heart. "What began as necessity has become more." The moonlight intensified as it reached perfect alignment through the skylight, bathing them in silver radiance that seemed to penetrate beyond physical form. The ceremonial aspects of the chamber, the sacred herbs, cardinal fires, ancient stones beneath their feet, amplified the moon's natural effect on their kind, creating perfect conditions for the bond's completion. Magnus's hands framed her face with careful tenderness. "May I?" he asked, respect evident despite the ritual's inevitable conclusion. In answer, Arya lifted her face toward his, consent clear in both movement and the emotions flowing through their bond. Their lips met in a kiss that transcended physical sensation, the contact creating a feedback loop of shared experience through their connection. Each felt the other's response simultaneously with their own, multiplying sensation and emotion in ways neither had experienced before. Where claiming had created basic awareness between them, this willing connection opened deeper channels of perception and sharing. The ceremonial gown slipped from Arya's shoulders under Magnus's careful hands, the silk pooling at her feet in the moonlight. His formal attire followed, discarded with equal care until they stood together as equals, all status markers and territory identifications removed. In the silver moonlight, they completed what fate and circumstance had begun between them. The physical union coincided with spiritual merging, their bond crystallizing into its permanent form as the ritual reached its culmination. At the moment of completion, the bond between them flared brilliantly in their shared awareness, no longer separate consciousness temporarily connected, but a single spiritual entity expressed through two bodies. Through this profound connection, Arya experienced an unexpected miracle. As their bond finalized, her vision suddenly clarified, not through her own eyes, which remained unseeing, but through a new inner sight that processed Magnus's visual perception while maintaining her own unique spiritual sensitivity. Two forms of vision overlaid and complemented each other, creating a composite perception more complete than either alone. "I can see," she whispered in wonder, as they lay together on the ceremonial furs, the moonlight still bathing them from above. "Through you, with you, I can see." Magnus's amazement matched her own as he experienced the enhancement of his senses through her spiritual sensitivity. Where he had always perceived the physical world clearly, now emotional and spiritual dimensions revealed themselves through her awareness. Intentions, emotional states, spiritual energies previously invisible to him now registered clearly through their completed bond. "We are truly one," he realized, the ancient text's descriptions suddenly comprehensible through direct experience. Soul-bonded pairs shared not just awareness, but complementary abilities, each enhancing the other's natural gifts. They remained in the ritual chamber until dawn, exploring the dimensions of their new connection, adjusting to enhanced perceptions, and simply experiencing the profound intimacy of complete spiritual merging. By the time morning light replaced the moon's silver glow, both understood that whatever external factors had forced their union, the bond itself was genuine and irreversible. When they emerged from the chamber the following morning, the transformation was immediately apparent to those awaiting them. They moved in unconscious coordination, responding to unspoken thoughts, completing each other's sentences without effort. The physical marks of their union, the renewed claiming bite at Arya's neck, the reciprocal mark she had placed on Magnus's shoulder during completion, were visible symbols of the invisible bond now permanently established between them. Elder Orion awaited them at the base of the tower, satisfaction evident in her ancient features. "It is done," she stated rather than asked, observing their synchronized movements. "Completely," Magnus confirmed, his hand finding Arya's with unconscious ease. "Then preparations must begin," the elder announced cryptically. "The council awaits your presence at midday. There are developments requiring immediate attention." The ominous statement cast a shadow over their newly established connection. Through their bond, concern flowed freely between them, each supporting the other's sudden vigilance. "What developments?" Magnus inquired, Alpha authority returning to his tone. "Silverlight forces have mobilized completely," Elder Orion replied gravely. "Thornwald appears to be preparing for full-scale invasion, not merely border harassment. And there is more." She hesitated before continuing. "A messenger arrived from the borderlands during the night. A young girl with unusual abilities seeking the Omega who speaks to spirits." Arya's interest sharpened immediately. "A girl? What is her name?" "She calls herself Serena," Elder Orion replied. "Perhaps 10 years old, with eyes that seem to see beyond the present moment. She claims to have had visions of you and Magnus together, facing some great darkness." The description triggered recognition in Arya, memories of stories from her childhood. "A seer child," she murmured. "My mother spoke of them, rare Omegas born with the ability to perceive potential futures. They haven't appeared in either territory for generations." "Precisely," Elder Orion confirmed. "The child's emergence now, immediately following your bond completion, cannot be coincidence." Magnus's protective instinct engaged immediately, flowing through their bond. "Where is she now?" "Being cared for in the healing quarters," Elder Orion replied. "She was exhausted from traveling alone through the borderlands, a journey that should have been impossible for a child her age to survive." The implications settled heavily between them. Their soul bond, completed mere hours ago, already faced its first significant challenge, not just the looming threat of Silverlight invasion, but the appearance of a child whose abilities connected to ancient prophecies and whose survival defied conventional explanation. After brief preparations in their quarters, Magnus and Arya proceeded to the healing wing where the mysterious child awaited. Through their bond, they prepared for the encounter jointly, sharing perspectives and insights without words, their recent union allowing seamless coordination of thoughts. The healing quarters were quiet that morning, most patients having recovered from the border skirmish days earlier. In a small private chamber, they found the child sitting cross-legged on a bed, small hands tracing patterns in the air before her as though following invisible currents. She looked up as they entered, unusual amber eyes focusing on them with disconcerting intensity. Despite her youth and the signs of difficult travel evident in her appearance, she carried herself with uncommon poise. "You've completed the bond," she stated, rather than asked, her young voice carrying certainty beyond her years. "Good. There isn't much time." Magnus and Arya exchanged glances, their bond conveying mutual surprise at the child's directness. "Time for what, Serena?" Arya asked gently, approaching the bed. The girl's amber eyes tracked her movement with eerie precision. "To prevent what's coming. The darkness I've seen in visions." She turned her attention to Magnus. "You know about darkness, Alpha Lord. The Shadowbane poison was just its first attempt to claim you." The specific reference to Magnus's poisoning, information a borderland child could not possibly possess, confirmed the validity of her unusual perception. "How did you find your way here?" Magnus asked, his tone carefully modulated to avoid frightening the child. "I followed the light of your bond," Serena replied, as though the answer were obvious. It cuts through the darkness like a beacon. The spirits of the thornwood guided me, saying the healer who freed them would help me too. Arya seated herself beside the child, intuition guiding her to establish connection through touch. When her fingers brushed Serena's small hand, a jolt of recognition passed through the contact, not the soul bond she shared with Magnus, but a kindred energy she recognized from her mother's presence long ago. "You're from my mother's bloodline," Arya realized suddenly. "A distant relation carrying the same gifts." Serena nodded solemnly. "My grandmother spoke of cousin Celine before she died. Said I should find her daughter when the visions began." Her small face clouded with remembered grief. "When Silverlight hunters killed my family for harboring mixed blood, I ran. The visions led me here." The revelation of Silverlight hunters deliberately targeting those with mixed bloodlines sent ripples of alarm through both Arya and Magnus. Through their bond, they shared immediate understanding of the implications. Thornwald's aggression extended beyond simple territorial ambition to something approaching genetic purification. "What darkness do you see coming, Serena?" Magnus asked, crouching to the child's eye level. The girl's expression grew distant, amber eyes unfocusing as she accessed whatever internal vision guided her. "A shadow that consumes both territories. It begins with invasion, but ends with extinction. The one who calls himself elder, but serves ancient evil." "Thornwald," Arya whispered, pieces falling into place. Through her bond with Magnus, memories transferred between them. Her lifetime of observations of the elder's unusual behaviors, his disproportionate fear of her healing abilities, his harsh treatment of those with mixed heritage. "Not just Thornwald," Serena corrected, focus returning to her unusual eyes. "He serves something older, something that feeds on conflict between our kinds. It whispers in his ear, has for decades." Magnus straightened, alpha protection instinct radiating through their bond. "We must bring this information to Council immediately. If Thornwald is merely a puppet for some darker influence, the coming conflict transcends territorial disputes." Arya placed a gentle hand on Serena's shoulder. "Will you tell the Council what you've told us? Your vision could change how they approach the Silverlight threat." The child nodded solemnly. "That's why I came. But there's more." Her small hand reached to touch the place where Magnus and Arya's hands joined. "Your bond is the weapon that can defeat the darkness. Together you create something it cannot corrupt or destroy. That's why it tried to kill you with Shadowbane," she added, looking at Magnus. "And why it wanted you exiled," she concluded, turning to Arya. The council chamber hummed with tense energy when they arrived with Serena. All 7 counselors were present, along with military commanders and Victor, who had assumed leadership of defense planning. Maps covered the central table, marked with the positions of Silverlight forces gathered along the border. Elder Orion raised an eyebrow at Serena's presence, but made no comment as Magnus called the session to order. Through their bond, Arya sensed his strategic thinking. Presenting the child's vision after establishing the conventional threat would provide context for her unusual insights. "Silverlight forces have consolidated along our eastern and northern boundaries," Victor reported, indicating positions on the map. "Our scouts confirm nearly their entire fighting force has mobilized. Thornwald appears to be preparing for full-scale invasion, possibly within days." "With what objective?" Councillor Thorne demanded. "They lack the numbers for sustained occupation of our territory." "Unless they believe they possess some advantage we're unaware of," Magnus suggested, laying groundwork for Serena's information. "Some weapon or strategy that changes conventional assessment." Through their bond, Arya contributed silently to his thinking, their minds working in tandem to process implications and strategies. The assembled counselors observed this unspoken communication with varying degrees of fascination and discomfort, still adjusting to their alpha's profound connection with the former Silverlight Omega. "We may have insight into Thornwald's true motivation," Magnus continued. "This child arrived from the borderlands last night with unusual information." All eyes turned to Serena, who stood between Magnus and Arya with remarkable composure for her age. Elder Orion leaned forward with particular interest as Magnus encouraged the child to share her visions. Serena recounted her experiences with the direct simplicity of youth, the visions of darkness consuming both territories, Thornwald's corruption by an ancient malevolent force, and the significance of Magnus and Arya's soul bond as potential defense against this threat. The council's reaction progressed from skepticism to reluctant consideration as the child provided details she could not possibly have known through conventional means. Specifics about Shadowfell defenses, the exact nature of Magnus's Shadowbane poisoning, and intimate details of Silverlight's internal power structure. "You expect us to base strategy on a child's dreams?" Counselor Thorne objected, though with less conviction than his words suggested. "Not dreams," Elder Orion corrected firmly. "Prophetic vision, the kind not seen in our territories since before the war began." She turned her ancient gaze to Serena. "The timing of your emergence is significant, child. Tell me, in your visions, what form does this darkness take when it manifests physically?" Serena's amber eyes clouded briefly before she answered. "Shadows within shadows. It has no fixed form, but when it takes possession, the eyes turn black entirely. I saw it happen to Thornwald during the last full moon. He's not truly himself anymore." The specific detail sent a ripple of recognition through several council members. "The border patrol that encountered Thornwald 3 nights ago reported unusual behavior," Victor confirmed slowly. "They described his eyes as unnaturally dark during conversation." Through their bond, Arya sensed Magnus's rapid assessment of implications. If Thornwald had indeed been corrupted or possessed by some malevolent entity, conventional military response alone would prove insufficient. The threat transcended physical conflict to something more insidious. "If what the child sees is accurate," Magnus addressed the council, "we face not merely territorial war, but existential threat to both Silverlight and Shadowfell. Whatever corrupts Thornwald seeks, not conquest, but annihilation." "How do we fight an enemy that possesses others and has no physical form of its own?" Counselor Alora asked the practical question, weighing on all minds. All eyes turned to Serena, who looked to Arya and Magnus with solemn certainty. "The soul bond," she stated simply. "What was broken at the war's beginning must be restored to end the darkness." Elder Orion nodded slowly, ancient understanding dawning in her features. "Of course. The legends speak of this. When Alpha strength and Omega healing unite completely, they create energy the shadow cannot penetrate. That's why soul bonds ceased forming when the war began. The darkness engineered our separation deliberately." The revelation shifted the council's understanding fundamentally. What had been viewed as territorial conflict suddenly appeared as manipulated division, orchestrated by an entity that fed upon their mutual destruction. "We need more than defense," Magnus concluded, strategy forming between him and Arya through their bond. "We need to take direct action against whatever possesses Thornwald before full invasion begins." "A strike team," Victor suggested, following the direction of Magnus's thought. "Small, elite, capable of penetrating Silverlight Central Territory to reach Thornwald directly." "Not to kill," Arya clarified, understanding flowing between her and Magnus. "To heal. If possession is the mechanism, then healing energy focused through our bond might free him from corruption." The strategic discussion continued as plans formed for both conventional defense and the specialized mission to confront Thornwald directly. Through their completed soul bond, Magnus and Arya functioned as a single strategic unit, each contributing complementary insights to create a comprehensive approach. As the council session concluded with defined action plans, Serena's small hand found Arya's, tugging gently to gain her attention. "There's something else you should know," the child whispered, her voice too low for others to hear. "In my visions, I saw you both with a child of your own, a daughter with my eyes, born of your bond." She glanced meaningfully at Arya's abdomen. "She's already there, growing. The first soul-bonded child in 30 years. The revelation stunned Arya momentarily, before awareness flowed through her bond to Magnus, whose protective instinct engaged instantly at the implication. Though their union had occurred merely hours before, soul-bonded pairs were known for unprecedented fertility. The possibility that their completed bond had already created new life added profound personal stakes to the coming conflict. As they departed the council chamber, preparations already underway for both defense and offensive action, Magnus and Arya withdrew briefly to process Serena's final revelation privately. "If she's correct," Magnus said quietly when they reached their quarters, his hand moving instinctively to rest against Arya's abdomen, "everything changes." Through their bond, Arya sensed the profound shift in his perspective, from Alpha Lord defending territory to potential father protecting family's future. Her own protective instinct engaged similarly, maternal concern for possible new life altering her assessment of coming dangers. "Whether she's right or not," Arya replied, covering his hand with her own, "our purpose remains the same: stop whatever corrupts Thornwald before it destroys both territories." And their bond hummed with shared determination, fear transmuted to resolve through their connection. Whatever challenges awaited, possession, invasion, or parenthood, they would face them as one entity expressed through two bodies, neither complete without the other. As sunset approached, final preparations for the strike team were completed. Magnus would lead personally, with Arya accompanying to provide the healing energy necessary to confront the darkness. Victor, Alara, and 3 elite warriors would complete the team, providing protection and combat support if needed. Their departure was scheduled for midnight, the darkest hour when Silverlight patrols would be at minimum strength. Their objective? Penetrate to the central Silverlight settlement, locate Thornwald, and attempt to free him from whatever corruption had taken hold. Before departure, Elder Orion summoned them once more to the ritual chamber, now empty of witnesses and ceremonial preparations. Only Serena accompanied them, the child's unusual abilities earning her place in these final preparations. "What you attempt has not been done in living memory," the elder told them solemnly. "Confronting ancient darkness through soul bond energy." Her gnarled hands pressed something into their joined palms, a small crystal that glowed with internal blue light. This stone was charged by the last soul-bonded pair before the war began. It has waited 30 years for this moment. The crystal pulsed between their hands, responding to their bonded energy with increased illumination. Through their connection, both sensed its purpose, a focus for their combined power, amplifying what flowed naturally between them. "When you confront the shadow," Elder Orion instructed, "channel your energy through the stone. What separates cannot exist within its light." Serena stepped forward, her small hand touching the crystal briefly. "I've seen this light in my visions," she confirmed. "It's the same that guided me through the borderlands." As final preparations concluded, Magnus and Arya found themselves standing on the battlements of Shadowfell's outer wall, looking toward the border they would soon cross. The waxing moon provided less illumination than the previous night's full brilliance, offering helpful shadow for their infiltration mission. "Are you afraid?" Magnus asked quietly, the bond between them carrying his own complex emotions, concern for her safety, warring with confidence in their shared strength. "Yes," Arya answered honestly, their connection making deception impossible between them, "but not of dying, of failing." Through their bond, understanding flowed freely. Failure meant not just personal defeat, but potentially the destruction of both their societies and the possible child Serena had foreseen. The stakes transcended individual survival to encompass the future itself. Magnus's arm encircled her shoulders, drawing her against his side as they faced the darkness beyond Shadowfell's walls. "Together," he said simply, the word carrying layers of meaning between them. "Together," she echoed, their bond pulsing with shared resolve. Below, the strike team made final preparations, weapons checked, supplies secured, strategy reviewed. Within hours, they would cross into enemy territory on a mission that defied conventional warfare. 6 individuals against an ancient darkness that had orchestrated 30 years of conflict for its own incomprehensible purpose. Their bond, completed beneath the full moon just one night earlier, would face its ultimate test, not just connecting two individuals, but potentially healing the rift between territories that had forgotten how to exist without enmity. The crystal from Elder Orion rested securely against Arya's heart, suspended by a silver chain, pulsing gently in rhythm with their connected heartbeats. As midnight approached, they descended from the battlements to join their team, both knowing that regardless of outcome, nothing would ever be the same for either territory again. The war that had defined their societies for 30 years approached its climax, not through conventional victory, but through confrontation with the darkness that had engineered their division from the beginning. Through their soul bond, strength and healing flowed in continuous exchange, each completing what the other lacked. Whether this union would prove sufficient against ancient shadow remained to be seen, but as they moved together toward the postern gate where their team awaited, both carried the same thought. Whatever comes, we face it as one.